Welcome to the Move the Stairs podcast, episode 64. We're recording on Wednesday, April 20th, 2022, and we are so happy you're joining us for today's exciting conversation.
Oh my gosh, today we are joined by Christian DuChateau, row editor from CNN, to talk about what you need to consider if you'd like national coverage for your CBD company, like on an outlet like CBN, CNN, all of these C's.
Too many C's today. We're going to talk about how national stories can really build your customer loyalty.
Yep, and in our media relations segment, we're also going to discuss what you should think about before pitching a national cable broadcast outlet like CNN.
And then finally, we're going to talk about what trends are out there that are going to help you build a resilient CBD brand. We're excited to ask Christian about that and what types of big news stories he is preparing to cover over the next 6 months. And remember, you can find all of our conversations with all of our wonderful guests at movethestairs.com.
So let's get started. Hi, Christian. Thank you so much for joining us on the Move the Stairs podcast today. You and I go way back. We won't even say how far because we were just talking about how old we felt. But anyway, so would you tell our listeners a bit about you? Because you've held a number of positions through the years at CNN, but now you're the row editor. What does that job entail?
Yes. Well, thanks for having me. And great to be here. Row editor at CNN. I am a member of a group. There are about 24 of us, editors and researchers, and we are like the editorial police, so to speak, for CNN. We look at scripts and stories and video before we take it to air. So if somebody's filing a story from Ukraine or from the middle of the U.S., and a reporter has a package script, they'll send it in to us to evaluate. We'll fact check it for accuracy. We make sure that it's editorially balanced and follows all of CNN standards and protocols. And that can take anywhere from 5 minutes for a day of turn. For investigative pieces, it's a longer process. It can go on for days, sometimes longer, depending on how in-depth the story is. But it's a great place to be. I started as a producer at CNN 20 years ago, and I really like being part of the row now.
So it sounds like trust is the driver that you're aiming for, at least within your position. And, there's a lot of similarities in that when you're talking about TV and CBD brands too, because we know one of the biggest challenges that they face right now, many CBD companies, because there's so many different options to choose from, is developing customer loyalty. So that trust is a pretty good bridge term there for what you do at CNN and what many companies are trying to do to develop a loyal customer base. So let's cross that bridge together. And, our first question for you is, do you think that having a CBD brand profiled in relation to a story that may air on CNN could help a company cross that bridge and build further trust with consumers they have now and potentially reach people who may not have heard about their brand yet?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, trust, as you say, it's key, for an organization like ours, for a CBD business. Your customers, your viewers have to trust you. That's something we strive for. And some of the keys that we apply in doing that, which I think other businesses could also do the same, is transparency is key for us. If you're honest with people up front about what you're doing and how you do it, and when you present it, letting people see how you came to a decision or how you arrived at a goal helps them understand you and helps build trust. Being honest and upfront, being accurate, it's key to establishing that trust. And I also think one thing that we try and do, which I think could also apply in the business world, is give people context. When people come into a situation, they may not know the backstory. They may not have watched CNN, days or weeks before, so they may be coming to a story for the first time. And if you're a business, when a customer approaches you for the first time, having the context about what your product is, how it serves a customer, how it could serve them in the future, how it works in a larger perspective or a larger world, that helps establish trust too. So transparency and context are two pillars that I rely on in my job, and I think would also help in the business world.
Like that's such a great point. And I love this, background information. I think it's important for people to understand what goes on and what companies have to balance. When you reach out to a company, for a story, to do a story, what kind of reaction do you get when you're trying to do an informational story like, what is this product or how is it made? Or, lots of people are talking about it. People want some information. Do you find companies or businesses are willing to talk to you, or are they sort of skeptical?
I've been lucky. I think in most cases, I find people are pretty willing, especially when you talk to people in the business world, or especially when you're dealing one-on-one with a business owner or somebody who manages their own business. If you approach them in an upfront and honest, personal way, you're going to get the same in return. I think, 99% of the time. If you're dealing with a huge organization and maybe you have to go at it from you're reaching out to a representative, but you want to speak to somebody further up the chain, that adds complication. That's a different situation. And governmental organizations, that's a whole nother ball of wax. But I think when you give respect to people, when you approach them in a respectful way and you're honest about what you're aiming to do, people will give you that same kind of respect in return. I never try and misrepresent myself when we're approaching somebody about a story, even if it's on a tough topic or something that's in the news that may have some, positive and or negative connotations with it. But if you're upfront and honest with people about your intentions, I've always had a real receptive return when I've dealt people in that regard.
I think that's so important because I think it's an opportunity. That's what we train the companies we work with all the time, that when the media reach out, it's an opportunity, even if it is that difficult story. And I think that's because, going back to your first discussion about context, that's where you have the opportunity to do that, to put the stories in context and to show that you're a responsible industry leader. I think the other thing that I want to ask you, though, is you've interviewed thousands of companies, I'm sure, over the years. Some of them probably have come off pretty well, and some of them maybe not so well. What do you think are the keys to a company preparing so that they do come off well when they're in the midst of an interview?
Well, I think being a news consumer helps. And, I think if somebody is doing an interview, you want to be as well prepared in advance about before you give the interview, and not just about your own topic. If you are an expert on CBD, or you're a business owner, a CBD business owner, it's important to not just know your own topic, but kind of understand who is interviewing me. How is this going to be used? Is this a print interview? Is it a radio interview? Is it a TV interview? Is it for the web? Is this for what we call a reporter package, which would be like a 2 to 3 minute report? Or is this a live interview that will then be edited and just placed online? Having some of that understanding before you speak helps, because if we're doing an interview, we may, in all likelihood, it'll get edited down. And so we'll just take the best pieces of the interview. And you can always find a good, quick segment or a quick line or two from interviews. But if you know what you're expected to do ahead of time, am I expected to give a quick 1 or 2 sentence response, or is this more of a longer conversation where we're going to be speaking back and forth? You can kind of not rehearse, but at least have an idea of what kind of answers you should give. And just knowing that kind of context, that timing will help you, and it'll in turn help the journalist who's interviewing you in finding the best pieces of the interview that will then be used as part of their story.
I think that's a great point that you mentioned, Christian, because you don't want to rehearse. If you rehearse, your answers to questions are just going to sound like they're rehearsed. They're not going to be genuine. And I think just as a quick follow-up, do you think that would hurt a brand to come off as, answering questions that may sound rehearsed as opposed to being more genuine?
Yeah, you've used the key word there, which is genuine. I mean, what we're looking for, what any journalist is really looking for, are people who are, appear to, or are, when they appear on camera, come across as authentic, as real people. Genuine is a key word there. You don't want somebody who sounds like, I've got this prepared soundbite and I'm just going to read it for you in answer to a question. I mean, politicians can do that and get away with it. And sometimes, they're very good at it, but people can see that. And I think when you're watching a news report or reading an interview, you can tell when somebody is giving an honest, straightforward answer, as opposed to when somebody is rehearsed and or too polished. So yeah, I think, like you say, you don't want to rehearse it. You just want to, be well prepared and be flexible, be conversational above all, and be yourself when you're being interviewed. That will all come across on camera, if so.
One of the things that we're really proud of at MNC is all of our journalistic background. And I know you and Diane know each other, and Sarah has worked in news for a number of years. I did as well. And we use that collective experience to really help our clients take advantage of every media opportunity that comes their way. And we help them position themselves, through the media as being an industry leader. And we know that doesn't happen overnight. So can you tell our listeners, what does CNN look for when they're researching companies and they're looking for somebody to, give an interview on an important industry topic? And, we very well may see this later this year with FDA regulations. So what are you looking for now as you're lining up potential interviews later?
Well, past experience, or this isn't laziness. I wouldn't call it laziness, but I will say journalists go back to what's worked before. Mm-hmm. And if there have been stories done in the past on a topic, we will go back and say, who's an expert on this? Who have we heard from before? We might look through past stories. You might look through past contacts. If it's a new topic, or you're looking for a new person or a new expert, we might contact or we might consult some of our experts in-house. If it's a health-related topic, I'll go to the medical team and see who they know. If it's political, I'll talk to my contacts in DC and see who they know. We look for people who have been interviewed in the media or might have done some sort of related work to a topic in the past that might have been part of a past story. But I mean, it can also be as easy as, let's look on the web. Let's Google this topic. Let's see what we can find. Here are a bunch of websites with a bunch of people. Who among these people look like somebody we would want to interview? Who appears to be professional? Who's got experience? So we can look online. We can look through past editorial. We can look at who are our competitors talking to. Those are all things that we take into account when we're looking for experts on a topic.
And Jordan mentioned this just a moment ago. We were expecting, FDA ruling any minute, by which I mean it could be any year now. So we know that there's a big change coming down the pike, or a big decision coming down the pike. What is the best advice that you can give a business owner who knows there is a big story looming out there, and they might have the perfect situation to illustrate that story or that point? How do they reach out to you? Do they reach out now, knowing that might be in the fall? Do they reach out as it happens. Do you know what I mean? Like, give some context for how somebody might help you illustrate that story.
Yeah. My advice would be get ahead of the story. If you know there is a big decision, a big FDA decision coming, reach out now or, early, and try and establish some contacts. And it can be as simple as, just emailing different people, throwing out the line and seeing who you can make contact with. Who can I establish? And not even like, I need to talk to this reporter so that I can line up a story to be done in the future, but who at this organization can I make contact with, and just let them know, hey, this is a story that I, know something about. And if your group is looking to do a story in the future, consider me as a resource. Keep me in your Rolodex. You could reach out to somebody within an organization, or if you do have the means or the contacts, speak to the journalist and say, I know you're busy right now, or I know that this story is not in the headlines this minute, but it will be later in the year. And when it does, keep me in mind. And then you can kind of establish a relationship, because having, most journalists have like some sort of Rolodex or contacts that they will go back to. And it may be that your story or a story on your topic may not be relevant right now, but when that FDA decision comes, or whatever the topic might be, journalists will then be looking to turn a story yesterday, and it'll be like, oh my gosh, my assignment editor gave me this topic. I need to turn a story for tonight's 10 o'clock news. How do I get this done quickly? If you have that relationship established, that is, 75% of the struggle right there. They know, oh, I know this person, I've spoken with them before. This is something I can go to them and get something set up quickly. And one more just thought on that topic is, if it's for television, think about the visuals, because we're pitched, or, networks and TV stations are pitched ideas all the time. But the thing TV always has to think about is, how am I going to show this visually? And if you include as part of your pitch, or as you make contact with somebody in the TV business, let them know that you have something that would be visual, that would work in a TV story. I work at a business that sells CBD. You can come to my business, you can record. We have a location that's near your station, or, we're busy with customers on these days. You can come in and shoot video for a story. You could even say, on a slow day, come and shoot something with us, and you'll have that B-roll ready for when this story breaks. So think about the visuals to some degree, because the TV people, that's what they're always thinking about when they're getting their stories together.
Isn't that the truth? And how many times have we said, oh my gosh, what are the pictures that are going to go with the story? But the other thing I want to know is, what's the biggest mistake that business owners make when they're being interviewed? And have you ever had to leave an interview on that, proverbial cutting room floor? I have to go back, because you said Rolodex, and I just love you for that, because you and I know what a Rolodex is, and maybe a lot of people out there don't.
For Jordan,
Yeah.
Rolodex
Yeah.
is a card thing where you put people
I had
and
to
phone
throw that
number.
in there, because I was like, yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's the same as leaving the video on the cutting room floor. We don't do that
Yeah.
anymore either. But what are the things that business owners should be aware of, so that they don't mess up the interview in such a way that, it's not even usable?
Yeah, I think I would refer back to just what we were discussing earlier, which is, you don't want to be too rehearsed, or you don't want to be too stiff. If you're interviewing somebody and they're uncomfortable, or they're giving you rehearsed answers, or they're trying to not be themselves. And I'm talking on TV, so I have to use my TV voice now. I have to put on a different persona. No, that doesn't work. Just be yourself, be conversational. Don't give rehearsed answers, but also don't give me 5 to 10 minutes in answer to one question. Most people, if you were having a conversation with somebody, you think about it in the same terms. If somebody asks you for an answer to a question, you'll give them a few sentences. You might speak for 30 seconds, but I guess it's easier to say than to do if you haven't done it. But being conversational is key to television. So when I say, if you're doing an interview, just think about it like you and I are just talking, directly to one another. The camera's just listening in or watching in. You're not speaking to the camera. You're not doing anything different than you would normally. And I will say I've been lucky in that the interviews I've done, I don't think I've ever had to leave anybody completely on the cutting room floor, figuratively speaking. But there are some interviews where you get back to the station or the network and you're looking through the tape and you're like, oh my gosh, there's not a whole lot we can use here. I can salvage something, but you have to do it creatively. If you can be conversational, be relaxed, be yourself, you might see more of yourself in a finished story. That's one way to be a bigger part of a story than letting most of your interview wind up, in the editing room floor.
That is fantastic advice. Got to be yourself, right? Next week, or next episode of the Move the Stairs podcast, Diane, I'm so excited you lined up this interview. We're going to be speaking with Maddie Mead of Hemptecture, and they specialize in hemp-based building materials. And if you followed any of our social media accounts, we've been watching what analysts are saying about hemp and the building industry. So we're really excited for this conversation.
Well, we're going to move on now to the third component of building brand protection, which is creating a resilient CBD brand. And we know that CBD business owners are constantly on the lookout for ways to strengthen their business, weather threats, and really protect their bottom line. And we've mentioned it a couple of times. It's like finding the opportunity in every challenge, lemonade out of lemons. And that's what we mean by building a resilient CBD brand. But Diane, why don't you start us off here?
Absolutely. Christian, I'm interested, when does a story really rise to the level that a company should consider reaching out to CNN? I remember we used to say that, does this story hit the bar? And your bar is much higher than a local news bar would be. So what's that bar? How do people know when it's really the one which this makes sense to reach out?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, how does a story hit the bar? I mean, I think that if you are seeing your topic talked about, and I'm speaking from a national perspective, right, but if your business or a topic related to your business, if you get up and you turn on the morning news, the Today Show, or Good Morning America, or New Day on CNN, and you hear it discussed there, that's the bar. If it's already in the news, then it's a major topic. If you are hearing about it online, if your friends are talking about it, if you're seeing traffic about it on your Facebook page, and it may be, hey, your friend's saying, I've been hearing about CBD. It's probably not the best example. The question might be more nuanced than that, but if you're seeing a lot of traffic on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, things of that sort, that's a good indicator that it's bubbling. And things tend to jump from social media to the news pretty easily. Another thing you might think about is there are all sorts of major stories that play out on national news that may be related, maybe not directly. Maybe CBD isn't the headline, but maybe the headline is people have a lot of anxiety about going out again now that the pandemic has eased. I'm going back to work, or I'm traveling again, or I've been locked up in my home, for almost 2 years now. I have some anxiety about just going out in public again. There's a CBD related element to that, in terms of relaxation and anxiety and things like that. So I would say, think about not just does this story hit the bar, but is there a related subtopic or sidebar that is part of the main story? And that might be a way into a story that's making news nationally.
Christian, I think you touched on this a little bit here in your last answer about, coverage trends that you're seeing when you're talking about COVID-19 and people, being locked up in their house for the last 2 years. But are there any applicable news coverage trends that CBD might be able to hop on board to outside of the pandemic related aspect of that? And if not, or even if so, my second question here is, are there any specific stories that you're following right now that would pertain to CBD, hemp, or medical marijuana?
Yeah, there are a couple of topics where I think, in the Venn diagram of news, there's definite overlap. And one of them is the economy. I mean, the economy is, rooted in most of the stories we're covering right now. We're talking about inflation and interest rates and people finding jobs and going back to work. The economy also will play a big part in the election that's happening later this year. And of course, national news and cable news will be covering that, 24/7 once things really get rolling. But I happen, just in preparing before our interview, and actually this came up yesterday in work, is that there was a new Pew Research poll that came out that cited just how many people are in favor of medical marijuana and recreational use of marijuana. And I was surprised. I mean, I think the reason we did the story was the percentage of people who support it is, far and above where I would have guessed it is, which I think it was around 60% favored medical marijuana use and recreational use. And I think 90% of the Pew poll favored one or the other. If you combine both groups, less than 10% of the people polled in this survey were against it. That's going to get coverage. A poll with numbers that high, that kind of support is going to create spin-off stories. And you can bet that lawmakers in Washington are looking at that. And, we've been waiting or hearing from people like Chuck Schumer in the Senate and others in Congress saying the Democrats are preparing legislation that's going to, ease the rules or maybe, make medical marijuana use okay or approved on a federal level. Those are things to keep an eye on, because that is going to be huge when it happens. And I think that there will be a lot of talk leading up to the election about that, because Democrats don't have a lot of positive news right now. They're looking for something that a lot of people in this country will get behind. And that is one topic to keep an eye on. So I would point to those two things, as well as the fact that we're post-pandemic, or more or less post-pandemic now. And all of the health topics that feed into that. We were talking about anxiety, but another one, and this is a personal one, for my family, not me personally, but within my family, is just sleep. How do you get to sleep? How do you deal with insomnia? That's another one where, CBD plays a direct role. And that's something businesses and people who are in the CBD world would be interested in, something that news organizations will be covering. So I think all of those things, those are the three big ones. I would give you: the health, the post-pandemic, the election, and the economy.
I hope everybody listening has a pencil and paper, or putting it on their iPhone, taking notes. Christian, so one last question here, and here's this is the doozy. If I am a business owner and I have a story that I think hits that bar, hits one of those topics or another emerging topic, what is the best way to pitch that story to make sure that, and to make sure in that interview that I am positioning myself and my business as a thought leader, someone who is worthy of ending up in your Rolodex or in your contacts that you would reach out to again and again?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would go back to the, reaching out early, try and make a personal connection with somebody at a news organization where you are thinking about or would like to see coverage. And it can start with an email. An email is probably better than a phone call, or, it could start with reaching out over social media, something like LinkedIn or even Facebook. But making a personal connection and finding the right person to connect with. I get a lot of pitches where it says, dear producer, or, dear CNN editor, would you consider coverage on such and such? If it's not somebody I know and it's addressed rather generically, then I don't really pay attention to it. But if it's somebody who makes, a well thought out, well explained contact, and even if it's somebody I don't know, if they reach out to me or a colleague, I've heard other colleagues tell me the same thing. They might reach out on something like LinkedIn and say, hey, not just sending a hey, let's connect, because that's almost like a generic email, but hey, my name is, Samantha Smith, and I represent this business, and I know that my topic or my business relates to a topic that's in the news now or will be in the near future, and I would like to become part of your Rolodex. I mean, maybe you don't use those exact words, but I'd like to make a connection with you for future coverage. I think we could both benefit. I know you may be looking for an expert on this topic, and news coverage would definitely benefit me. So, be honest and upfront. Be personal. I mean, I sound a little bit repetitive, but I think being transparent, being forthcoming, and if it's a beneficially mutual, if it's mutually beneficial for the two of you, then go ahead and say so. And I think journalists appreciate that honesty.
Mm-hmm. Well, you bring up the point that and actually, I'm kind of glad that you're repetitive, because that's a point that we talk about over and over and over again, is authenticity and making that authentic connection, so that you're being really clear about who you are, who you represent, what you can offer, and doing it in an authentic way, in a respectful way, right?
Absolutely.
So that this becomes a working relationship, ideally a working relationship,
right?
Moving forward. So I'm really glad that you brought that point home, because this isn't a kind of a one-hit wonder. Ideally, it shouldn't be a one-hit wonder.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the goal, is that you establish a relationship, and not something that it's one and done. I'm sending you this email. Hopefully we do a story and then we never talk again. No, we do stories, again and again and again, and it can be something that you can come back to, and it may be weeks, months, even years later, or a year later, but the stories CNN or news networks tend to cover don't change dramatically. I mean, there are new topics that come up, but, helping people with their health, or talking about the economy or politics, those are, tried and true topics that we're going to cover day in and day out.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. And I'm going to say thank you on behalf of Diane. She was sharing earlier that she has internet challenges today. And so she popped out, I know, before she wanted to. But we are so grateful for your expertise today, for your background, and for sharing some of these ideas with us. And it's, I think, so helpful for our listeners, our viewers, to understand what that bar might be, because they see businesses, what appear to be local businesses, interviewed on CNN on this national platform, and they think, well, gosh, how do I do that? So this has been really, really helpful to give people that perspective and that background, so that they can understand how that happens.
Oh, I'm happy if I was of any help at all.
You've been wonderful help. So thank you so much, Christian DuChateau of CNN. We really appreciate your time today.
You bet. Happy to do it.
All right. Thanks. Have a great day.
You too.
Well, gosh, Jordan, so much information in this one. My goodness.
I know my notepad is full.
I was going to say, I saw you like scribbling away back there.
And I know I say this for every interview, but Christian, I'm going to have a really difficult time picking and choosing which sound bites here to use. And honestly, I may have to pick like 4 or 5 or 6 or 12 because there's so many great
usually
points.
We do 3, but this one might be, a 2 for 3 for per point, right?
Yeah, as we drop this into the blog. And I want to start with, we talk about how CBD brands can develop customer loyalty. And I think one of the things that Christian did a really great job in framing this as, if you're going to approach CNN or any other national news outlet, or heck, even your local news, and you want to come off as somebody who is genuine and trustworthy for your brand, do your homework. He said specifically, be a news consumer. So it's not just popping on the news and saying, hi, here's who I am, this is what I do, and the whole 9 yards. Research who you're going to be talking to. And this is something we do on behalf of our clients too. When they get the phone call from a reporter that says, hey, we're going to put you on the nightly news. Figure out who you're going to talk to, figure out what they need from you so that you can give that to them, while doing your due diligence for your brand. I thought that was wonderful.
Yeah. Well, and because Christian, we're all journalists, so that was such a cool thing to have a, current conversation about journalism. But, that insider media relations that we specialize in based on our journalist experience, again, and I come back to this all the time, but authenticity and, really truly building an actual relationship so that your goal is not just, hey, I got to get on CNN, but, how can I be authentic, have the right information, be respectful, be useful to someone? How can I be that kind of contact that earns me a spot in the Rolodex, in the contacts, in the whatever, so that I'm that phone call that a journalist is making 3 months later, 6 months later, a year later, when the law changes, whatever, they go, you know what, man, I talked to somebody who was so useful, and they weren't trying to sell me on a product, but they gave me this context for the industry and context to help my viewers understand this story. They were great. Man, that's somebody I'm going to go back to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Christian's fictitious person for that was Samantha Smith, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yep.
So if he's seeing an email from Samantha Smith that says, hey, this is who I am, this is what I do, here's why I may be able to help you for future news coverage, that's going to help you build your brand's resiliency by elevating yourself as a thought leader. And I thought that was brilliant for Christian to be so forthcoming about the primary topics that are important right now. And I love the description he used, Venn diagram. What is the Venn diagram between hemp, CBD, and or medical marijuana and news right now? And he listed those off, talking about the air quotes post-pandemic era, because we're obviously still considered in the pandemic, but the post-pandemic era, talking about the economy and potential legislative challenge or changes that may be coming at the federal level. So I thought that was brilliant. Just all in all, wonderful conversation.
Yeah. Well, we are so grateful to our special guest today, Christian DuChateau from CNN, for joining us on the Move the Stairs podcast. We thank you for listening and watching, and we've got so much more to come. So we hope you join us next time in a couple of weeks for our next all new episode of Move the Stairs. Thanks for listening.